It's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Ray Fittipaldo, and we're going to be talking about all the updates with Aaron Rodgers. While some out there might be saying the Steelers are desperate to sign him, are they really when they had him in their facility and they let him just walk out without a deal? We'll talk about that, this quarterback draft class, and Ray's outlook on the safety position, especially with Minkah Fitzpatrick this year, all here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive Podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive Podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo, and we are your Steelers writers here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Read all our written work at post-gazette.com. Find this show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get those episodes and all the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in an accident or you will need workers' compensation help, they are the place to call at 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, Brian and I broke down the situation that happened last Friday. You know, our guy Jerry Dulac breaks national news. Aaron Rodgers is at the Steelers facility, and everyone's like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And of course, it means nothing because he is not signed with the Steelers. He left the facility after being there for about 6 hours on Friday. But Ray, one of the takes that we've seen a lot of is that, man, the Steelers look really desperate to sign Aaron Rodgers to get this done. But are they really that desperate if they let him get in their facility, talk to them all that time, and he just walked out without a deal? Or is this kind of just a situation like, hey, if you sign, it's kind of like how Cam Hayward said, if he signs here, great. If not, oh well.
Yeah, I think there's two things going on. I do think that's right. You know, if Aaron Rodgers wants to retire, I think the Steelers would be fine, likely moving on to Mason Rudolph and have him be their starter in 2025. I think there's also the notion out there, Chris, that maybe the Steelers on the inside know a little bit more than we do at this point about what Aaron Rodgers is saying. And the fact that they're willing to wait this out tells me that, okay, maybe this is going to happen, but it's going to happen on Aaron's timeline, and we're not going to really push it. And in due time, we kind of know the answer now, but in due time, Aaron's going to make it official. That's kind of the read I have on it as well. But listen, I think in the end, I think you might be right. I think if we talked, I think a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, about the Steelers not wanting to overpay for some of these mid-level quarterbacks. And I was out last night and I was listening to talk radio, and Andrew Brandt was on, and he said Justin Fields right now, he thinks Justin Fields is overpaid. He said Justin Fields right now is the only quarterback coming off a rookie contract who is making $20 million a year. So there's this huge gap between the guys who are making, between 30 and 35 and 60 million. And then there's all these other guys who are, under that, including Justin Fields. And you see the quarterback market for Jameis Winston and Mason Rudolph. I mean, those guys basically got the same deal. So it's an interesting market right now. My gut feeling says the Steelers know what's going to happen, and they're just going to let Aaron sort of do it on his own timeline.
I feel like the same thing. And again, I think that's the situation that you want, right? Like you're not begging a guy to come in. You're not overpaying for that. You're not messing up, your salary cap next year for a deal this year. You want to just say, hey, you know what? Here's this offer. It'd be great to have you. And I think that also kind of further shows that, like, hey, when Aaron Rodgers, if you choose to come here, you're choosing to come here and you're playing by our rules, because that's the other thing that I think that a lot of Steelers fans are worried about is, you look at what happened with the Jets, didn't show up to OTAs, didn't show up to mini camp, questions about his commitment to the team, and, players like Garrett Wilson being like, well, is he going to even show up at training camp? Like all that drama that happened that year. The Steelers, I think, have a chance to show, hey, Aaron, you could do this now while you take your time to choose whatever you want to do. Well, get the whatever money you want and do that. Just know this is our offer and we're not moving from it. And if you sign up for this offer, this is going to be the expectation moving forward. I wonder if that could actually work on an Aaron Rodgers, Ray, because I imagine Aaron Rodgers can sit down at the table and say, yeah, I'll show up for all that stuff. And then we'll be sitting there in spring and being like, well, there's no Aaron Rodgers. And that'll be a story every single day that we do this show throughout the spring.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think the roster is set, but let's say Aaron Rodgers signs. I don't think the Steelers are going to appease him with receivers the way the New York Jets did the last couple of seasons. Devontae Adams isn't coming here. He just got signed by the Rams. I don't see the Steelers going out and getting Lazard or anyone else like that. So I think it's important for Aaron to be there during OTAs and during minicamp and to be engaged. I mean, I'm not saying that he has to be there for all 10 OTAs, but I think he would want to be there for at least 7 or 8 of them, just so those receivers and the tight ends can get on the same page as him. So all guys are different in terms of their late career routines. Ben Roethlisberger was on the golf course half the time during OTAs, when he was in the latter stages of his career, but he knew those receivers. He had that.
That was his offense.
Yeah, he had that chemistry down pat with him. So, I think Aaron would realize the situation. If he skips out on 1, 2, 3 OTAs, I wouldn't make a big deal out of it, but I think he does have to be here more often than not. He's got to be engaged because I think this is a one-shot deal, right? Finish your career on a high note, get the Steelers to the playoffs, see if you can get a playoff run. If neither of those two things happen, right? If Rodgers has a bad year and or the Steelers have a down year and don't win a playoff game, this is going to be looked back upon as a failure. So I think Mike Tomlin has a lot at stake here. Aaron Rodgers has a lot at stake too. We know this isn't about the money. The Steelers are going to offer somewhere between, I think, 25 and 30 million to offer him a 1-year deal. He's made so much money. This is about him going out on the right note, what he thinks is the right note in his career. And this is about Mike Tomlin finding that bridge quarterback to get him to the next franchise quarterback, whether that comes this year in the draft or, next year in the draft when it's being held in Pittsburgh.
No, I'm right with you there. In fact, you actually look at it, Ray, it's been since 2021 that Aaron Rodgers has played a full season and had a winning record. He was 5-12 last year as a quarterback. He only played one snap of a game in 2023. And then in 2022 was last year with the Packers. He went 8-9 as a starter. So it's been a hot minute since Aaron Rodgers has been like the guy in the NFL. And I knowing Aaron Rodgers and the way that he's talking about things, I bet he'd want to show everyone, I still got it, man. It wasn't me in New York. That was a system thing down there. And I think it's the 25 to 30 range, I think is pretty accurate. You look at the spending, like you said, Justin Fields, I'm just going to run through some numbers here right now. You go up through all the rookie quarterbacks and then some veterans, like Daniel Jones is getting paid $14 million a year with his current deal. Justin Fields, $20 million. But then after that, you get Geno Smith averaging out at $25 million a year. Baker Mayfield, 33.3. Sam Darnold, 33.5. Derek Carr, 37.5. Matt Stafford, $40 million. I'd imagine that, between that Geno Smith and that Baker Mayfield range, that's kind of where if you're the Steelers, if you can get Aaron Rodgers to sign to that, that's reasonable. That works for that. Because he has to know that, hey, if you want the Steelers if you want to work with the Steelers, they're not willing to overpay you for what you've been, because again, it's been a minute since you've been the guy. This is now 4 seasons ago that you were an all-pro quarterback. So I do think the Steelers have some leverage there, and maybe even more leverage than what people might be admitting when we're talking about this subject.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the it's been a while since Aaron Rodgers has had success in the regular season or even the playoffs. You look at his playoff record since beating the Steelers in Super Bowl 45, it's not all that great. I know the Packers had a great year the year after. I think it was 2011. They get bounced early there. They were sort of like the Steelers, like in last decade, like from 2011 until 2020, kind of like the killer bees of the Steelers, really good during the regular season. You have all this offensive weaponry, and you can't get it done in the playoffs. So there's a lot of similarities there between, I think, Rodgers and Roethlisberger and both the Packers and the Steelers. Very good teams during the primes of their career, and they just weren't able to get over the hump and get that Super Bowl.
Absolutely. We'll talk about quarterbacks the Steelers could add in the draft this year in a minute here. I did a Sunday feature on that. I want to get Ray's thoughts on how that breaks down. We'll do all that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment is over? And who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. It's the insurance company's doctors. If that doesn't make you feel great, then guess what? You got to call Edgar Snyder Associates because they do workers' compensation. And if you call 1-800-94-EDGAR today, you'll find out that they fight hard for the workers' comp rights that you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. This episode is also brought to you by UFC Gym Pittsburgh. Are you ready to train like a champion? UFC Gym has everything for total body health under one roof. They have group classes from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to Zumba, personal training, cardio, weights, cryotherapy, infrared saunas, and more, all for an unbeatable price. Not sure where to begin? All members get a starter session with an expert coach to help map out their fitness plan. Your first visit is on us. Drop in with free parking at Market Square or the waterfront. Follow UFC Gym on social media. Train different, feel unstoppable at UFC Gym. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's look at this 2025 NFL draft class. Now, Ray, we have been screaming from the heavens to try to get people to understand this. This is not the year to be gunning for the franchise quarterback. It's just not the year. There aren't that many guys that fit that bill. Cam Ward is my one guy that I feel comfortable saying that he's a decent chance of fitting that bill, but he is the only one. Shedeur Sanders, I don't know if he's actually going to be that guy, if he's going to be a primetime quarterback, or if he's going to be Kenny Pickett all over again. Same thing for Jaxson Dart. I don't feel confident about that, but I do feel like, Ray, this could be the year of the backup quarterback in the NFL draft. And that's what I wrote in my Sunday feature that focused on the quarterback position and breaking it down. You know, sure, those early options, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, probably too much to trade up for. But you look at those other guys, if Jaxson Dart were to fall to the third round, that's where I'd feel comfortable taking. If Jalen Milroe, who the Steelers talked to last week before his pro day, that's who I'd feel comfortable taking in the third or fourth round. Or if they waited to the fourth and they got a Will Howard, a Tyler Shuck, a Quinn Ewers, those type of guys, I think that's the sweet spot of where the quarterback value is in this draft class, because those guys I could see as they could be projects, they could be backup quarterbacks, and that is the kind of investment that I think wouldn't hurt the Steelers as far as their plans to develop the roster around what will eventually be when they make the play at franchise quarterback in next year's draft class.
Yeah, so let's take Ward, Sanders, and probably Dart off the board too. Let's say somebody takes Dart within the first two rounds. I'm going to give you my favorite quarterback out of those kind of late day 2, day 3 prospects, and then you give me yours. You know, you got guys like Riley Leonard and Will Howard, you know, winners, right? They don't necessarily do anything elite, but they're good leaders, and I sort of view those guys as good potential backup quarterbacks in the league. There's nothing wrong with them, but I don't have a ton of high expectations. Then you have your category like of a Jalen Milroe. Guy has all kinds of talent. What did he run? 4.5. Yeah, whatever it was. He ran an excellent time for a guy his size. He's just not an accurate quarterback. And there's a lot of development that would need to take place there. And people are saying it's not even going to be like you're going to sit a year. More like got to sit 2 years and really learn how to play NFL football. For me, the guy that I like, and he's an athlete, and he's a really elite thrower of the football. The only reason he's not being talked a lot about more is because of the injuries. It's Tyler Shuck. I mean, this guy, you watch him drop back in the pocket and throw, he looks like an NFL quarterback. And then you see he runs a 4.6. Okay, then you sit back, he's 25, 26 years old. He's had all these injuries. So I think that's why, you know, he's getting pushed back into that late day 2, day 3 range. If there's one guy that you take a flyer on, for me, it's Tyler Shuck. What do you think, Chris?
I like Tyler Shuck, and I put him in that range of the stash and develop quarterbacks on this draft class. That if you got him late day 2, early day 3 in the draft, you'd feel good about it. Because when I look at Shuck, the thing that he does that I think that no one else does as well as him in this draft class is he knows how to manipulate defenses. When he recognizes, hey, it's a cover 2 zone, it's a cover 3 zone, it's man, and we can get this. I've seen him recognize coverage versus coverages and say, I can manipulate with my eyes, go from first read to second read, third read, bang, get the ball out. And that's important. Now, there's times I think he didn't do that consistently enough to be, definitely a franchise quarterback or anything like that. But the way that he did it, I was like, hey, that's something you can work with there. And I think that's something that gives him an advantage. If it wasn't for his injuries and the fact that he's going to be 26 years old when the season starts, I would be considering like, hey, you know what? Maybe this guy should be a little bit higher up. And I think that those are the things that kind of hold him back. He also has that ideal size at 6'5", 219, running a 4.6 in the 40-yard dash. Like that's a really good, build for a quarterback. So I like that there. I think my two guys that I look at, I really like Will Howard. I think that the way that he handled the playoffs for Ohio State, made some big time throws under pressure, with pressure in his face, handling the big situations well. I think those type of things, they speak loudly to me about how he handles those situations. Granted, there's times that he didn't handle situations right, like when they lost, I think it was to Notre Dame, or no, it was Notre Dame, no, it was to Oregon early in the season, right, when he slid and the time ran out. It was just like, buddy, you messed that one up. But he got his lick back. He led Ohio State to a national championship. And so I think that shows growth there in him. And Jalen Milroe, simply because if you can get Jalen Milroe preferably in the 4th round. Like I wrote that, like if they probably will have to get him in the 3rd round. I don't think that teams will let him get to the 4th round. But if you got that guy in the 4th round, that's your Justin Fields. Like, he's not as developed as Justin Fields was, but like now you have an athlete. He's 6'2". He runs fast. You could put in packages where he's going to get the ball and he can take off. And then you could say, hey, we're going to design up a shot play. I don't need you reading where the safe. Your one read is George Pickens open down the sideline. Throw it up to him. Give him a one-on-one shot. That could be something that you work on with Jalen Milroe. And then you have the next 4 years to see how he develops in training camps and preseasons, and to just go from there. But I like the idea. I think, again, the sweet spot for this draft class to me is if you can get to day 3 of this draft, that 4th round, and then all of a sudden you get there and Howard and Shuck and Quinn Ewers and Riley Leonard, if those guys are sitting there, I think the Steelers can feel confident taking one of those guys and feeling like, hey, we got a young quarterback in the building. If they turn into this version of Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson or Tom Brady, as far as a guy that wasn't taken right away and become a star, sure, awesome, great. But the most likely result there is you found your future Mason Rudolph, which I think that would be a win. Look at Mason Rudolph for them right now. How many years has he been that pinch hitter for the Steelers at quarterback and come into rescue for the rescue, let alone his last season with the team where he won 3 games at the end of the season to get them to the playoffs, but just early years when he backed up Ben Roethlisberger. That's important. And even if you get the franchise guy next year, you're going to want that young backup guy to develop behind them on your roster as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for the Steelers, unless you find a way to get a pick back in the 2nd round, you almost have to get your quarterback in the 4th round, don't you? Because I know there's a lot about a debate about where you go with 21. I still think it's going to be D-line, but
I'm with you.
Let's just take a combination of position groups. In your first 2 picks, 21 and 83 before round 4, you got to get a D lineman and a receiver or a running back. It doesn't have to be a receiver. I think if you get a running back in round 3, you're fine. If you reach for a quarterback and then you're kind of trying to address receiver or running back round 4, 5, 6, like I don't like that. So to me, there's enough of those backup grade quarterbacks that you can sit back and wait for a guy in round 4. I don't necessarily want to use a pick in the 3rd round at number 83 on a quarterback.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that Jalen Milroe, I know that he might be gone by the 4th round, but I think I'd be willing to roll the dice there because, like you said, if you're drafting a backup quarterback in the 3rd round, you're basically limiting yourself to one player on the first 2 days of the draft that's going to be a contributor right now for the Steelers, and that's not what this team needs right now. And granted, technically, you're getting DK Metcalf with that 2nd round pick, so it's 2 players, but you know my meaning here is as far as adding talent at wide as rookies to this roster, that third round pick could be a solid rookie wide receiver or a solid rookie running back. But if you wait to the fourth round, some of those options might be off the table by then. And if they're off the table, then all of a sudden you're saying, but you can still probably get one of those day 2, day 3 backup quarterback types that work on you, they're going to sit on your bench anyways this year, whether you get Aaron Rodgers or not, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Mason Rudolph or name another person in free agency right now. I think that's a safe bet for the Steelers right now, is to make sure they get it right when it comes to next year. But as far as this year, don't overspend. Just like you're trying to not overspend at quarterback in free agency, don't overspend in the draft, especially if you think next year's the year to go trade up and go get that guy. Make sure that you use especially that first round pick and that third round pick. And who knows, maybe they get us another day 2 pick in this draft somewhere if they can move back in the first round, recoup some compensation and make a move there. But make sure those day 1 and day 2 picks are buttressing, are supporting that roster that you're trying to get to be ready for your rookie quarterback move next year.
Yeah, lots of time between now and the draft. We're pretty much 1 month away, but it'll be interesting to see if the Steelers want to get back into the second round this year. This is known as a very deep draft. There's maybe not a lot of elite talent in the first round, but the talk is you can get starters day 1, day 2, day 3. I'm sure they would like to get a second round pick back. Let's see what happens in the next month or so.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to Ray about his breakdown of the safety position, both in how it relates to the Steelers' current situation with Minkah Fitzpatrick and the safeties available in this draft class. We'll do that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, remind you, this show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or visit their website at moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
We gave the all-electric Prologue EX class-leading passenger space. And we made its tech intuitive with Google built-in. Perhaps that's why we were named Best Overall EV and Hybrid Brand by Kelley Blue Book. It's nice when a dream comes together. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter here with Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about your piece on the safety position, because I think that's a position that doesn't get talked about a lot right now, because the Steelers have, I think that they're solid there veteran-wise, but your point is they're not supposed to be solid at safety. They're supposed to be having elite playmaking, and they haven't had it for a few years now with Minkah Fitzpatrick and what it'll take to get there. Minkah Fitzpatrick is making a $15.5 million salary cap hit in 2025 that carries a $22.3 million cap hit. That's not just solid money. That's, you need to be a difference maker money. What do you think it would take to get him back to that point? Or is he past the point of being a supreme playmaker for the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, I look at Minkah much in the same way I look at T.J. Watt. I think both of those guys have to be open to having not new roles within the defense, but, in TJ's case, they got to be able to move him around, flip-flop him from left to right, get better matchups for him so he could be a more impactful player. And I think Minkah, the Steelers have to do the same with him. You just can't sit him back there and have him be your last line of defense, because teams know he's a good player and they're not going to throw in his area if they can avoid it. So, that's kind of where I am with that. But for me, it's almost like those guys have been here a while, right? TJ since 17, Minkah since 19. They're very comfortable with their roles. And it's almost like you have to sort of urge them, hey, you're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable doing this, for TJ rushing from the right side, and Minkah, we're going to have you closer, maybe to the line of scrimmage, covering slots. I know you didn't like that in Miami, but we got to do this to get you more involved. So those guys have to be open to it as well. It's just not a matter of Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin doing it. You have to have your stars on board and buying into that as well. So I think TJ and Minkah are both a little bit guilty of maybe feeling a little bit too comfortable with where they are in the defense and not wanting to maybe experiment. I think this offseason for me, it's all about experimenting, putting those guys in different positions, seeing how it works out. Because we saw late last season how TJ Watt was neutralized, say the final 5-6 games of the season. We've got like a 34-game sample size now of Minka Fitzpatrick being neutralized. So to me, the coaches have to not only be creative this offseason, but they got to be those motivators, and they got to get those guys to buy into it as well.
No, I agree, and that's something that you got a new secondary coach, Gerard Alexander, coming in, and I guess he's not new because he's coming back to the organization after being the assistant a secondary coach. But now he's coming in, and he has a chance to he has a chance to kind of say, hey guys, this is what we're going to do better this year. But I think one thing, when I look back and I see the best years of Minka Fitzpatrick with the Pittsburgh Steelers, is when they had really good corners that the Steelers could just rely upon, when they didn't have someone that they were kind of having to back up all the time. When it was Joe Hayden, Steven Nelson, he could be more aggressive because he could trust them to win in one-on-ones, that to not get beat deep, and he didn't have to kind of play babysitter a little bit like he has the past couple of years with some of the stopgap cornerbacks that they've assigned. Now, of course, they got a new stopgap cornerback, in Darius Slay, to pair it with Joey Porter Jr. But they need Slay and Joey Porter Jr. to be those guys on the outside that don't allow the plays to get behind them, so that Minka Fitzpatrick can get back to the roaming, setting things up type of role, and also so that quarterbacks feel pressed to throw it in dangerous situations. I think that the pass rush has been effective still, not as effective as it was, in the years when TJ Watt was like setting records and everything like that, but it's effective enough. But they need better underneath coverage to force some of those, those poor, deeper throws downfield where Minka Fitzpatrick does make a play on the ball. He got one interception on Lamar Jackson last season. You want him to have 3, 4, 5 interceptions, because then he's making those plays. And also, when he starts making those plays again, now teams are scared to throw the ball down the middle part of the field, and it sets other chances up for other players in the secondary to make plays, because the quarterbacks say, I'm not throwing it this way, I'm going to take my chances over here. And then all of a sudden, you might throw an errant pass that a slot cornerback like Beanie Bishop jumps and takes back for a good play. Yeah,
if you go back to Minka's first game with the Steelers, it was a road game at San Francisco, and he created a turnover very early in the game because he was close to the line of scrimmage, and they were forcing the action. Now, over time, like I said, the Steelers have pushed him back, and he's gotten very comfortable playing that center field position. Listen, it worked out. The season after he signed that big contract, he had one of his best seasons. He had 6 picks, forced fumbles, fumble recoveries. But ever since then, it just hasn't been there. And if teams are going to scheme to take your stars out of it, you got to have answers. And I don't think the Steelers have had enough good answers in the last 2 years to make Minka a more impactful player.
No, I agree. And that's something that's important there, is to have an impactful player. But Ray, you include this. I also broke down the safeties earlier in the offseason, looking at the top safety options out there. Nick Emanwari out of South Carolina, he's my top safety. I think his athleticism tests off the charts. He runs a 4.3 40-yard dash. He looks like a playmaker. Xavier Watts led college football in interceptions out of Notre Dame. Billy Bowman, a really good athlete, smaller but really good athlete for Oklahoma. Malachi Starks as a lot of people's top safety this year. I think his measurables could use some work there, but I think he's still really talented. And then, of course, Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State. Is there a situation where you see the Steelers take a shot at safety at some point in this year? Are they good with Minka and Deshaun and Juan Thornhill that they've added recently?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a need, but when you look at the contracts of all those guys, your top 3, Elliott, Thornhill, and Minka, are pretty much on 1-year deals. The Steelers, Minka is signed through 2026, but they could walk away from that pretty easy, Chris. I think it absorbed maybe a $5 million cap hit, and they would save like 20-some million on their salary cap if Minka doesn't have a good year. So I sort of view all those guys almost like they're on 1-year deals. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me if they took a safety. Now, it would be a surprise to me if they took one in the first round, but yeah, I think anytime after that, 3, 4, 5, your later picks, I could definitely see them taking a shot on a guy. Last year they tried to do it with Ryan Watts. Unfortunately Ryan got injured. I think he was on schedule to make the team. Good athlete, good special teams player. Not sure if he's going to be back. So I think in that same range, probably day 3, rounds 4 through 7, maybe get a safety, maybe see if you can get a guy you can develop into a future starter.
Certainly will be something to watch moving forward for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We will keep a watch on the quarterback situation if something develops with Aaron Rodgers or something develops as far as other signings the Steelers have. And we'll keep you up to date with all of our coverage of the draft heading into it. We're a month away from the draft, Ray. It's crazy how fast time flies when you're having fun covering the NFL. From Chris Carter and Ray Fittipaldo, thanks for tuning into the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll see you again Wednesday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.